Hey Shakers, and welcome to Worth Your Salt, the podcast that shakes up your marketing game in the health and wellness industry. Worth Your Salt is brought to you by Salt Marketing. Salt Marketing helps health and wellness practitioners build trust and authority to attract a steady stream of inbound wellness seekers. For more information, you can visit us online at saltmarketing.co. I'm Jennifer Oraquah, StoryBrand Certified Guide, Marketing Strategist with Salt Marketing, and your host for today's episode of Worth Your Salt. Now, if you've ever considered starting your own podcast, and if the numbers from our episode on podcasting are true, that's a lot of people, you may have hesitated. After all, you've really got to put yourself out there. You've got to have something to say. And what if no one listens? What if your voice just isn't all that unique or you get negative feedback? These doubts and uncertainties can be paralyzing, holding us back from realizing our full potential to help as many people as possible. Anna Marie Frank has fearlessly embraced the challenge of sharing her expertise and insights with the world on her wellness podcast, Happy Whole You. As a brain health professional, entrepreneur, and advocate for holistic well-being, she's not only shattered barriers of self-doubt, but also reached a wide audience with her mission of prioritizing wellness, both mental and physical. Anna Marie, I appreciate you joining me today on Worth Your Salt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I want to learn a little bit about how you found your voice. Can you share a little bit about your personal journey with brain health and how it led you to become a practitioner and an advocate in this field?
Yes. So, I struggled with depression since I was in high school. I didn't know what it was. I just ultimately didn't feel right inside, but for no apparent reason. I was a 4-sport varsity athlete. I got good grades. I had a roof over my head. My parents were married. It didn't really make much sense. Went on to college, was a D1 athlete, struggled there with my mental health. And then once I went into my career, I thought, okay, now that I'm making money, now that I have my degree, now that I have all these things, I should be happy, right? Well, no, that didn't work out that way. I went to a doctor and spent about a short period of time. He put me on 3 mind-altering medications, and I went down a spiral. During that time, I luckily had a little light inside of me. Woke up, realized I need to rewire my biology. I need to rewire my brain. I'm the only person ultimately that can make myself happy. I did not have a voice during that time. The voice that I had was internal, that bully inside my mind, but I wasn't outwardly speaking about what I was going through. I was hiding it all. And through the journey of working on myself is ultimately where I did find my voice. And that was a long period of time. But I started to realize I am not the only person going through these things. And through what I went through, I ultimately realized I need to help other people heal their brain, rewire their mind, and feel better. And so that's how I kind of got to where I'm at now with how I work with people.
And today you're not just an expert in brain health, you're also a seasoned podcaster. But did you ever experience moments of self-doubt or imposter syndrome during your podcasting journey specifically? How'd you manage those feelings?
Yes, 100%. So I think one thing is, when we think nobody is going to listen, we have to realize that is just a false narrative, because whenever we're going to step outside our comfort zone, that is when we will feel pushback. And what I've done is I've kind of rewired it in my brain. So when I'm feeling that nervousness or that pushback, I actually override that and flip it into, oh, I'm doing the right thing. Because when you get uncomfortable, that is when you know that you're stepping into something that you are going to grow through. And the more you do that, the easier it does become. But it was recognizing that. And I remember when I thought, I'm going to start a podcast, and I started my podcast during COVID, I believe. And I'm a big proponent of just doing it. Just jump in and do it. Quit thinking you have to have the microphone, the headphones, the right lighting, like all the perfect things. No. And so all I did is I actually started my podcast by recording on my phone. And I found someone that, and I wouldn't even go back and edit. I just started with just having a conversation with the listener, and then I would upload, and it was and then I would post it and forget about it. So that's how I started. That was my process. And so it was, and I think we're over 150 episodes in now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it seems like the antithesis of your personality when you describe who you were in high school, who you were in college, to just put it out there, do it dirty and get it done. I love that.
Yes. And you refine it over time. And And it's also the people you surround yourself with, because what I've realized is the things that I talk about, I'm like, well, doesn't already everybody know that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it's like, okay, but then, well, why would other people care? So we have these thoughts that we have, and it's like, just step into it, because if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it. And so it's good to talk about these things.
Yeah, that's great advice. So with your extensive background in holistic health, how do you integrate those principles into your podcast and your approach to wellness?
A lot of things that I do is I just share not just what I know, but I share what I know with stories. And I think that that's really valuable, because that's how you're going to connect with your listeners. And for all the practitioners out there, if you just started your podcast with just sharing stories around different things, whether it's around something with hormones or whether it's around nutrition or whatever it is, number one, nobody is sharing the story in the way that you are sharing it. And two, you are going to be unique in your own way, because you're not anybody else. And so I think when we go back to the storytelling, that's really, really helpful. And we can feel more comfortable in sharing and starting off with storytelling versus I have to say everything super technical and, because that's analysis equals paralysis.
And I love that idea, because, you said that just a minute ago, that, doesn't everybody already know this already, but it's the way that you tell it, it's the way that you frame it that really makes your voice unique. So I'm wondering, what strategies do you use to really stay authentic and confident in your own voice, especially when maybe looking at more complex topics or even controversial topics?
Yes. I love a little controversy. So I just go back to focusing on my future self and my authenticity. I know who I am as a person, and I know what I stand for, and it's okay if people don't agree with me. And I think that just takes some time and confidence. And it's also, being true to yourself, meaning like something really simple is, if you say you're going to do something, do it, right? Like if you say you're going to create a podcast, like, oh, I'm thinking of doing a podcast, I'm working on a podcast, do it. Because the moment you don't do it is the moment that you really abandon yourself. And then when you abandon yourself, you're probably struggling with your word with other people. And so when you follow through with your word, it allows you to have that confidence, because like, oh yeah, I say these things, but I don't know if I'm really going to do them. That will diminish your confidence. And so I think just like being a person of your word and just sitting in your truth, and it's okay. Like I live my life by these two good sayings that I learned about. And in a book, it was something along the lines of, your life couldn't have happened any other way than how it's happened this far. So we all need to embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly of our past and share it, because again, storytelling and sharing, we're never alone. And then the second one is, it's not my job to prove myself to anyone. It's my job to show up for myself and do what I say I'm going to do. And those two things give me a lot of confidence, and they're very helpful. So those are kind of mantras of mine.
Those are great advice. I need to take a quick sponsorship break, but right when we get back, I want to talk about your podcasting processes. Hey there, Salt Nation. Jennifer Oraquah, marketing strategist and StoryBrand certified guide. And I have something special for you today. If you're tired of watching your marketing budget disappear without seeing the results that you deserve, you're going to love this. Salt Marketing's latest checklist will help you maximize your marketing budget with smart strategies to get the most out of every dollar. This checklist is packed with 10 actionable tips. From defining crystal clear goals to harnessing the power of targeted advertising, we've got you covered every step of the way. Grab the insight that helps our clients succeed, including how to leverage free and low-cost marketing tools and why we say organic before paid, and teach you how to track and analyze performance for higher returns. Say goodbye to wasted ad spend and hello to a smarter, more strategic approach to marketing. If you're ready to make every dollar count and take your business to new heights, head on over to saltmarketing.co/results and download your free copy of Maximizing Your Marketing Budget today. That's saltmarketing.co/results. Trust me, this is one resource you don't want to miss. Let's make your marketing dollars work harder for you starting now. Let's maximize every dollar, Shakers, and let's make a difference in the lives of those who need us most. We're back here on the Worth Your Salt podcast with Anna Marie Frank, host of the Happy Whole You podcast. So how do you select your podcast guests? What kind of criteria do you look for when you're inviting experts to share their insights on Happy Whole You?
Well, really, I just look at what is their story, right? Like I always go back to the story. What is their story? What are they trying to share with the world? And a lot of times I find that there's a uniqueness to their story. And based on that, I will set up an interview or sometimes we'll do kind of a pre-interview where we'll just talk and I'll get to know the guest that's coming on. And my process is really just flowing organically. So when I bring somebody on, I find out, what's the key takeaways that you would love to give to the audience? And then let's have an organic conversation. And so through that organic conversation, I feel like we get a lot of great content out of it. And and the guest just has to, it's somebody who's doing something that's unique and they are showing up in a way that is not like everybody else. And that's kind of what I look for with the guests that I bring on.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that helps us all in the do it scared kind of way. Yeah. And I love what you said about, doing that kind of pre-interview, getting to know them a little bit. So can you share any of your strategies or tips for effectively communicating? Sometimes these concepts are difficult and, trying to get them to people in a digestible, engaging manner. Does that have to do with the questions? Does that have to do with the answers? How does that work for you?
Well, I think it's just, I'm a very direct communicator. So there's different types of communicators, but I just try to keep things a little bit surface level with what I talk about on the podcast. And when I do that, I think it helps the listener because we have to remember we are an expert in our own way and not everybody knows what we know, even though it's like second nature to us. And, and so it's like when we make it more digestible and keep things more surface level, I think that you're going to have more people that listen, more people that can process it. And it's just easier for them to digest. And I like to use a lot of visuals and not with the storytelling as well when I'm explaining. And if it is something more, technical, if you will.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So on that note, like simplifying things, kind of distilling it down into what people can actually put into practice, what kind of motivates and drives you to continue producing this valuable content for your audience?
So, I love that you say that because honestly, when I first started the podcast, how I would use the podcast as well is like, I think my first 20 some episodes were just different things I would talk to my clients about. And so instead of repeating myself over and over, what I would do is I would say, hey, let me send you this podcast link. Have a listen to this 7, 10, 15-minute podcast on this topic about the liver, about brain types, about ADHD, about anxiety, whatever it may be. And I would use that. We would use the podcast as a tool, which we still do use it as a tool. I look at it as a tool. And then one of the things that I've grown into is every time I interview someone, I learn something new. So it helps continue my education, which is amazing. And, you build a network of people. So I think also if we look at our podcasts, anyone that feels hesitant, number one, look at it as a tool. This is going to give you credibility. This is a tool that you are going to be able to use with your clients. And then also, if you do develop down the road where you want to have guests on, look at that as a part of your continuing education process. Look at that as your networking opportunity. So there's so much value in podcasting, and then just find the right people to plug and play. And so I hired a guy where I have my recordings, I download them through Zoom, or sometimes I use Zencastr as well. I download those, I send them to him, and he does his magic, and then he sends it back. And it's very, very simple. I didn't do that in the beginning. But again, it was very, very simple. And I think we overthink things and we overanalyze. So just getting those steps in, I think, and viewing it, the lens you view the podcast through is very, very important. If you look at it as something as I have to do it, I'm stressed about it, it's not for you. But if you look at, I'm choosing to create a podcast, I'm choosing to connect with other people, it's going to feel a lot better and be more authentic.
And that idea of networking through your podcast, I love that idea. So now that you've hosted, what is it, 150 episodes? Is that where you're at?
Somewhere around there. We're
so
keep going.
yeah, I know. And so I was trying to keep up with that. But any advice on staying consistent? How do you just keep doing that consistently?
So now in my schedule, I have 3 days a week that there's an hour in my morning where I keep it open. And if I have a podcast guest, they are scheduled during those times. If they are not scheduled, I fill that time with writing or some other content creating activity. And then if I'm just recording a podcast by myself, I can't tell you how many times I've like gone into my closet up in my bedroom and I'm like, kids, don't bother me, you know? And it's like, I just like, because I felt inspired because I had like this thing I wanted to say or something I wanted to talk about. And I've done podcasts for 7 minutes. I've recorded them for 10 minutes. I've recorded them for 20 minutes. Just me, just sharing information through my phone and not using the video. And that's the other thing is the first probably 140 episodes, I did not use video. I only used the audio. And now I'm starting to dip in to use the video. So, again, like just start with recording your information, start recording your story, start is the key. And then get it out there and get someone who's a professional that can support you on that process. And it makes it so much easier.
I love that. This is our second video episode. Not even kidding. So, yeah. All right. It's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. Hey, Salt Nation. This is the Worth Your Salt podcast. I'm Jennifer Oraquah, and today I'm talking with Anna Marie Frank about how you can build your authority by confidently and consistently sharing your expertise. We'd love to hear your thoughts on hosting your own podcast, so be sure to join Salt Marketing over on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let us know how you're using your voice to support your personal mission. So, Anna-Marie, you've demonstrated an unwavering commitment to sharing your expertise in brain health and wellness through your podcast and various other platforms. So, for people who are inspired but are kind of hesitant to start their podcast, what would you say to convince them that if they have a passion and a knowledge, they really have an obligation to share that with the world? Why shouldn't they be afraid?
Oh my gosh. It is our job to show up in this lifetime. Okay. Like you had a 1 in 400 trillion chances of being born. First and foremost, there will never be another you ever again. And it is your unique blueprint of who you are, what you have been through that is going to help evolve your soul, move humanity forward. And I believe it is every individual's responsibility, one, to take responsibility for your life and show up in a way where you are sharing and helping others. And that may look through volunteering at your church, that may look for doing, showing up in a job that aligns with you. And that also may mean you got to get it on your phone and record a podcast and share your story. Like this is so important. And podcasting is, people are like, oh, well, it's been around and who's going to listen? It's like podcasting is just getting started. Just getting started. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And there is room and space for all of us to show up and share our story and be authentic. And I think it's our job to to do this. Like we need to, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. And the podcasting community is also very tight and very supportive of other podcasters. So I'm wondering, what are some of the most rewarding aspects that you find of being a podcaster? How do those moments kind of fuel your passion for continuing to podcast?
Oh, I have people that have been a guest on my podcast more than once as well. And just developing that relationship, following them on their Instagram accounts, on their LinkedIn accounts, liking and sharing what they're up to, has been really, really cool. So I think that, keep growing the people that you're working with, is really, really rewarding, within the podcast world. And everybody is very, very supportive. One of the things that we'll do sometimes is we'll do podcast swaps with other, holistic practitioners and things like that. And then the other thing is, I coach people, I do a lot of different things under the Happy Whole You brand. But I will bring other people on that do similar things that I do. right? And so some people are like, well, why would you bring another coach on? Why would I not? Right? Like I'm not the right person for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have more awareness around holistic health, around the wellness industry, and more people out there supporting each other in a way where we're plugging people into these resources. And the podcasting, you know, everybody in the podcasting world, I feel like they're all supportive of each other. And I've had other coaches have me on, you know, like it's just, it's a really cool. And I think that at the end of the day, like with what you're doing, Jennifer, like, you know, it can take some work and it takes some consistency, but it's so rewarding once you get started. And it's the getting started, recording that first one. And then you're like, oh, it's not as hard as I made it up in my brain.
Right? Yeah. I love that. And I love that you're coming from a place of abundance. Like we can all share this, you know, that there's a community around this that we can absolutely share with one another. And I was wondering, as someone who's like really passionate about ending mental health stigmas and helping us all kind of upgrade our brains and our biology, how do you envision Happy Whole You and your holistic wellness initiatives contributing to like a cultural shift, prioritizing mental and physical well-being? What changes do you hope to see in the world as a result of your voice?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, everyone to really recognize that one, our brain is the strongest pharmacy on planet Earth, and you get to choose happiness. You get to choose how people make you feel. You get to choose how you feel. You get to choose what you do every day. You get to choose how you think and how you speak about your life. And when we take that power back, your mental health will start to improve because you take your brain out of this limbic, the reptilian brain that we have, and you go back into your prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function thinking. And when you can live from a space of executive function thinking and live from a place of authenticity, living through your heart and not living through fear and scarcity, you will show up in a way that is so powerful, and your brain will work on so many more cylinders than what you ever even dreamed possible. But it's a shift in how we're thinking. And I really hope that, you know, in our culture, this instant gratification culture that we live in, I hope that we go away from the scarce mentality and we go into a more abundance mindset, because there's enough for all of us. Unfortunately, we have, you know, a culture, a government that makes us feel like, well, for them to win, you have to lose. That is not true. There is win-wins all over the place. And it's just getting people into that mindset of win-win relationships, of there's enough to go around. And unfortunately, we're not programmed that way through our culture and through biology, right? Our DNA is like, avoid all the scary things, run from a tiger. Like this is true, but you know, we're actually more safe than we've ever been. And there's so many more resources in a way that we can get to them a lot quicker and at a lower cost than ever before. And so what I like to do is just remind people of some of these things, remind people of the shifts that we can have in the way that we think and the way we show up. And I think if enough people do this, and podcasting is one of the best ways to get your word out there, then, you know, if I change one person's life, they're going to change another person's life. And that ripple effect is abundance. And so, you know, I think shifting how we think is so important, and it will help to heal the brain.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective. I love that. So what's your vision for the future of the Happy Whole You podcast?
Oh, you know, I actually was just before this call, I did hire a company. And again, this is something I just did as I'm growing. And they help to get me on other podcasts, which is very helpful because not all of us have the time to like sit and search and, you know, email podcast hosts. And so now I pay someone to do that for me. And the conversation actually centered around, because I don't sell anything on my podcast. I don't do promotions, things like that, but it's really valuable to do that because I know the products that I use. I've created my own line of products, but I also use other lines of products that are clean, that are safe, that are like highest standard. And people are always asking, well, what do you use? And now I'm like, okay, now I'm going to start to put in a sponsorship opportunity for the Happy Whole You podcast. So that's one of the things that's coming up. I also brought on a co-host. So some of the episodes I have a co-host, which is so much fun. And so her name is Heather Laganelli. She's just an amazing human. And so now she's going to be on the podcast. She's already been on the podcast, and we are interviewing people together. We'll interview people on our own.
Nice.
And so it's morphing into this collaboration with another host, and then even bringing on sponsorships so we can share some of the most amazing products and opportunities out in the world. So that's kind of the future, but I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So, talk to me in a year. Well,
right.
my goal this year on my vision board was to record 30 podcasts within the year and then be on 30 podcasts. And I think I'm probably going to like kick that goal. Like, I'm going to do way more, but I also set up a realistic goal. So if I'm recording 2 to 3 podcasts a week, I'm on target, so I think that when people are like, oh, I have to release one every Monday, when they first get started, it's like, give yourself a break, like, like just get something out once a month. Maybe it's twice a month. And then you may find that, every Wednesday you're dropping a Wellness Wednesday podcast, so again, like give yourself some space and grace because, obviously podcasting isn't the only thing that I do. It's an element and it's a tool that I brought into my practice to help, support my clients and to support the community around Happy Whole You.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I'm wondering if you have any advice for aspiring podcasters in the health and wellness space who might worry about criticism or negative feedback. How can we build that mental resilience and kind of stay confident in our mission?
Well, I think if you come from a place of authenticity and share what you truly believe to be true for you in your life, and you share that in a way that these are my thoughts. This is what I've seen. This is my experience. You're going to have people that are going to come against you, and just know when that's happening, you're doing something. You're doing something because you're triggering something in them. Nobody who makes a difference in this world does it without resistance. So that's just what goes with it, and you can misspeak on a podcast, and then you just use your next podcast. By the way, it's your platform to say, hey, y'all, you know what? I said this thing and I actually learned that I was wrong about it. So I just wanted to clear that up. I mean, just be authentic. None of us know everything.
Right.
We're not always going to be 100% right. And that's okay. So you just got to own who you are, own what you say. And if you got to say, hey, yeah, I screwed that up. I mean, we're not politicians here. So we can go back and say, I'm human. I messed up. Like, this is totally normal. But yeah, I mean, that'll happen, but just know it's going to happen in a way that means that you're doing something. I've recorded a couple podcasts that, could be controversial. And then I've recorded one podcast in particular I recorded was how holistic health was killed or destroyed or something like that in the United States. And I take everyone through the timeline of how, homeopathy, naturopathy, and holistic health has specifically, purposefully been pulled out of our colleges, our universities, and and that stuff it's not necessarily like the pharmaceutical industry, and the government want that to get out there, and so I'm bringing stuff up like that to say, hey, let's ask more questions. Hey, if they're telling us to look away, I'm going to look, right? Like, and that's okay to do that. And I think it's okay to talk about it. And I think it's okay. And we need to have more critical thinking and ask questions. Ask questions to help you understand. And again, we're not asking questions to prove our point. I'm not, talking about this stuff to say, hey, like, you must be holistic and you must do wellness. Western medicine is bad, right? Like, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just asking a lot of questions and like, help me understand how, this is helping people's health, So I think when we come at it from a curiosity standpoint, that can be very, very helpful, and just own what you're saying.
Yeah. And I love that idea, that authenticity, that curiosity. I think that builds a lot of the trust that we talk about, building authority in the marketplace. You have to be out there and be vulnerable and be willing to be that. So I love those ideas. So if we want to learn more about you, about your podcast, about your product line, all the things, where can we go?
Yes. So you can go to happywholeyou.com/podcast. We're also, Happy Whole You podcast is on any platform, so you can listen to it there. And then on Instagram, we're at Happy Whole You. If it's okay with you, I want to throw in one more thing.
Yeah.
So when we think, I want to talk about, like, just share this little nugget about leadership that I think is really powerful that I got from my coach. And she told me a real leader, a true leader, is somebody who is creating something or making something happen that otherwise would not happen without them. So if you are truly a leader in the space of health and wellness, you should be creating a podcast, and it's not going to happen without you. And so I think I always remind myself about that when I'm in the creative space, because it's like, okay, yes, I'm leading, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And that's kind of that confidence boost to push us along, because not everyone's going to be our cheerleader. Yeah,
for sure. Well, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of, if you have this knowledge, if you are able to do this, you really have an obligation to share it. I mean, you've got to spread the word. You've got to help people understand and be curious themselves, and ask those questions. So I love that idea.
And thanks for giving a platform to encourage, because I think this is definitely needed. So thank you.
Of course, links to Anna Marie's Happy Whole You podcast, as well as the ways you can connect with her around the mission of mental health, will be available on our website at saltmarketing.co. But right now, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are a few quick questions that I like to ask of every guest. Anna Marie, are you ready?
I think so.
All right. What's something about you that surprises people?
Oh, wow. Well, oh, man. I'm a lot more sensitive than I put out there. And I love to rollerblade still.
That's a good one. I like that. All right. What's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Just helping people feel heard again.
Very nice.
Giving them hope.
And you may have already answered this, but what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I think, gosh, that leadership one is pretty
That's
darn
a good one.
good.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. And then, no one else is going to do it like you. So just show up and do it. Take action.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So finally, who is inspiring you right now? What podcasts are you listening to? Or maybe what's the best book you've read recently?
Oh, anything by Michael Singer. The Untethered Soul, the Michael Singer podcast is pretty good stuff.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much for joining me this week on this episode of Worth Your Salt, Anna Marie.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our audience and let you know that if you're ready for your Worth Your Salt debut, tell us about your expertise by emailing us at grow@saltmarketing.co. Be sure to subscribe on our website so you never miss an episode. Finally, leave us a review or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Worth Your Salt. Be sure to join me again next time. In the meantime, let's get out there and shake things up.